Welcome to another Berlin-Peck Memorial Library Take and Make craft video tutorial. Today's craft is yarn baskets. Your kit will include a printed template for the basket, an embroidery needle, a chopstick, and some yarn which you can select at the library, or you can provide your own yarn if you prefer. The supplies you will need at home include a pair of scissors, a hole punch, some clothespins. I have 5 or 6 will be enough. You can also use binder clips if that's what you have. And some white glue. It can be school glue or a white craft glue. Both will work. Let's get started. The first step in creating our yarn basket is to cut out the template. And you're going to cut around the outside large circle, and you'll cut out all of these little triangular gray areas. Now I have one that I've already cut out. So once you have cut out those little triangular pieces, you get this shape, and you're going to want to fold up every single one of these little ribs. They're going to form the sides of your basket, and the easiest way to do that I've found is to just put your finger right on the edge and fold that up. Now you can also see I have already done that with all of mine. After you do that, you can also see I've done one more step. I have taken my hole punch and I've punched a hole in each one of these little ribs. And this is going to allow us to sew the top right here, hold on this whole top piece here, and secure the basket all together. So once you have gotten to this point on your template, all your pieces are folded up, then you can begin the weaving. And the weaving is very easy. For our yarn, I recommend that you use a medium or a bulky weight yarn. You can use a thinner yarn if you prefer, if that's what you have. Just be aware that one, you're going to have to weave more layers, and also you may be able to see through the woven yarn and see your structure underneath. So just be aware of that. But you can test it out, do a few rows if you like, just to see how it covers. And you can always pull it out and change it. It's pretty easy to change. So as we look at the basket that we have, I've used 2 different colors on my baskets here. You could certainly do this all in one color if you prefer, but I think it's nice to have the little contrast. So I'm going to start with the main body color, which for this basket is going to be this pretty gray. So you can pick anywhere on this template to start. You want to leave yourself a bit of a tail, because as you go around, you're going to fold that up and secure it behind your weaving. So I'm right-handed. It actually works best for me to have the yarn on the right-hand side, but you do what feels comfortable to you. You can go either way. It does not matter. And we're going to go on opposite sides of each of these ribs. So it's very simple, just in and out. The first couple of rows, you don't want to pull too tight because you want to make sure this stays in place. But as you go along, you can start to adjust the tension of your yarn, because eventually we want all these sides to come up. Now, another thing that you're going to want to consider and be mindful of as you go around is making sure as you build these layers up that you don't have big gaps on the outside. And as I go, I'm going to show you what that looks like, so you'll see what I mean there. Now, as you get to the place where you started, you want to tuck this extra string behind. Every time you cross over on the inside, make sure that you're tucking that under, and actually this first one, actually just be aware of that first one. You don't want it to come out. All right, so I'm going to keep going here. And you'll notice that I have alternating. So the rib that I was on the outside before, I'm on the inside now, and vice versa. So these first, as I said, these first couple of rows are kind of your foundation. You don't have to be super tight with them. As you go along, you'll start to make sure that you pull them down, and you can see each time I go through, I'm also giving a little tug on this yarn to bring these layers down. And we're going to speed up this process in a little bit, but I want to show you, make sure you see how to tuck this first little layer in. Okay, so I'm back on the inside. You want to bring this up. If you want to, you could even kind of tuck this up through the hole to help keep it in place. It's very easy to forget that step. So it helps if that's up in place, and then you don't have to think about it. Okay, so we're just going to keep doing this back and forth, and as I said, as you go in between each one, be mindful of where these ribs are. So you want to give enough tension on your yarn that your basket is going to close up like this. You don't want it out here. I mean, I guess you could have it out there if that's what you wanted, but you would have probably some gaps in between. All right, so we're just going to continue weaving. Okay, at this point, you can see I am, I guess you'd say about 2/3 of the way up the side of the basket with my main color. I have ended my yarn right where I started. Now, before you go on to your contrast color, you do want to go back through and make sure that all of your weaving layers are as pushed down and compressed as you can make them. That way you won't see your cardstock underneath. So you want to go to each juncture and hold the top of your template and then just press those layers of yarn down. Depending on how tight you did your weaving, you'll have to do more or less of this. But even if you've been pulling it down all along, you still have to come along and do this pushing down. It really makes for a better result afterwards, a better final result. Now, once you've done that, you may decide that you want to come up a little higher with your main color. It really depends on how much of your contrasting color that you want. The contrasting color, wherever you start, you're going to bring it up to about halfway across where you've punched your hole. So now that I've pushed mine down, I'm going to give a few more rows of my main color. Okay, so I have added a few more rows. I've decided this is as much of the main color that I want. I'm going to go around one more time and just push down all your layers. Make sure that they are tight together. And take your scissors and cut off that main color yarn. You can leave plenty of a tail. You probably won't use that all. You're going to weave that in kind of in the same way that we did the first time. And now we're going to start with our contrasting yarn here. So I'm using this really pretty navy blue to go with the gray. And this weaving is exactly the same as what you've already been doing. We're going to put that in, leave a little tail behind, and continue on. You'll have to hold on to this again that first time around until you get it woven in and nice and tight. And as I mentioned before, you're going to take this contrasting layer so it comes about halfway up the holes that you've punched. Okay, so now we've gotten to where we have that tail. This tail I'm going to cover up on this rib, and this gray one I'm going to cover up on this one. Okay, as you can see, I have done a number of layers of my contrasting color. Most of those layers are covering a portion of the holes that we've punched in our template. So now we're going to do the finishing touches. You can see I've trimmed off my excess yarn, so I still have a little string here. This we're going to, I'm actually going to weave this in a little tighter. Try to leave that over that hole. Once I stitch, I'll stitch over those. You can leave it loose, a little bit looser, or tuck it through. Both will work. You're going to go over this with stitches, so you just want to make sure that that's tucked in somehow. Now, we're going to return to our main color, and this is where you're going to need the clothespins. We're going to be wrapping the main color around the top at least 7 times, maybe a little bit more. It kind of depends on the weight of the yarn that you have. And what we're creating here is this little rounded top. It's going to cover over the top of all of those ribs and just give a really nice finish to the basket. So you're going to start, and you can take one of your clothespins to hold this in place. This top is a little bit loose, like it's not super tight. So it doesn't really matter whether you go on the inside or the outside of the basket. I start usually like a little bit on the outside, and then once I get a couple rows, then I add in some more clothespins to help that that yarn from coming up out of place. So I've got 4 clothespins on here, and you may find you want to add a few more just to keep things in place. You can also do a couple of rounds and then reclip. I have now gone around, I think about 8 or 9 times. And I'm going to just finish up around where I started and trim that off. And just make sure that my clothespins are holding everything. Our next step is to return to our contrasting color, the navy blue, and we're going to stitch this closed and finish up this basket. As you stitch closed, you want to be aware of any little extra yarn ends that you have. You should have probably one from your contrasting color and then one from your main color along the top. One thing to pay attention to is you're going to cut this contrasting yarn before you stitch. You want to give yourself plenty of yarn to work with. You can add in a second piece if you need to, but it makes it a little more difficult. So just pull off plenty. Depending on the look that you want, with the stitching, you may want to do multiple stitches through each hole. And this is one type of stitching that I did here. I'm going to show you something that's a little bit easier than this, and but you still may want to go over it a couple of times, depending on the look that you want. So I'm going to thread my contrasting color into my embroidery needle, and I am giving myself lots and lots of length. Now to start this, I'm going to weave this through what I've already woven just to secure that end. And also this plastic embroidery needle works pretty nice for this. So what I'm doing is I'm going to feed this needle through what I've woven. You can start down as low as you can and just weave up. Okay, so you can see I have that tucked under what I've woven, and I'm just going to pull this yarn through. Now if that other end is in your way and you want to start in a different spot, that's okay too. Now the thing to be careful about with this is once you get this free end pulled in and tucked underneath, I'm actually going to tuck that under until you get some of these stitches set on the top. Don't pull on it too much. In fact, you might even want to leave your finger on it, because if you pull too hard, you will pull this right out of there and then you'll have to redo it. I know we've got a lot of little free strands here. You want to, oh, and look, see, I did not follow my own advice. I'm going to have to do that again. So let's try it again. What you can also do is leave some of that end sticking out and just trim it when you're finished, which I think is what I'm going to do, just to make sure I don't do that again. Okay, so I'm going to tuck these little loose ends here And we're going to go from hole to hole. So the toughest part is really just beginning. You want to tuck that down below. And we're going to go, so we have our string coming out the right along the inside. We're going to go around the outside, find that hole. I've got my finger here so that I can pull nice and tight. So you want to pull that nice and tight. Any little loose yarn ends that you have, tuck those under. Go over the top again. Find your next hole on the outside. Make sure that you are tucking underneath all of those looser strands. Back to the outside, over the top. So this part, you do want to go kind of slowly and carefully. And just make sure everything is neat and tidy. Keep going over the top to the next hole. As you stitch through, I don't know if you can see that, you want to make sure that you're staying above what you've woven already. Okay, at this point I have gone all the way around once. Now you can see you might have to go and just adjust where those extras, that top yarn is, so that it's all covered. And if you want, you can just stop here. And that's one kind of look. It's just kind of a thin contrasting. I like it a little bit thicker, so I'm going to go around one more time. Okay, I have done 2 layers of this top binding stitch. Now I'm going to tuck my excess in and finish this off. So you're going to tuck this in just kind of the same way that we did before. Run your embroidery needle underneath. Go down as far as you can. Pull that excess thread down. Just be careful as you get to the end. You don't want to pull too tight, but make sure it's nice and secure. And then use your scissors to trim off both ends. You can use the end of your embroidery needle to help kind of work that in and hide it. If you have any other little pieces hanging out, feel free to trim those off. And the main part of our basket is finished. Now you can see that I have finished the bottom of these other baskets, and this one is just how it will finish look when you are done with your weaving. So you could finish the bottom of this in a number of ways. You could cut a piece of felt that matches your yarn and just glue that right on the bottom of your basket. You could leave it just the cardstock if you want. But I'm going to show you how to finish the bottom with the same color yarns that you have used on your basket. Now, some of you may have attended our yarn art program a few months ago, and we're going to be using that same technique to finish the bottom of this basket. It is very simple. This is where your chopstick comes in and the glue. And all you're going to do is we are just going to glue down this yarn in a spiral on the bottom of the basket. And it's super simple. It just really takes a little bit of time and patience. I'm going to do the bottom in my main color. This, if you want to do your two colors, it does take a little bit more. It's slightly more difficult. So if you haven't ever done yarn art before, maybe just stick to the one color. This one you can see I just did in the one color, but I had a variegated yarn. This one is just going to be a single color, single strand at the same time. This one I created by holding both color strands at the same time. So it just gives you an extra strand of yarn that you have to deal with. But this is very simple. You're just going to do a generous line of glue. I'm starting by going about halfway around. And the chopstick you're going to use to just keep your fingers out of the glue. Actually, no, I'm going this way. So I'm just placing the yarn in place and I'm using the chopstick to push it down into the glue. Once you get to where you have finished adding glue, just add some more. As you create these rows, you're going to keep pushing outward so that you get a nice tight layers. And that way you won't see too much of space in between your layers of yarn. If you find that you haven't put enough glue in one place, you can just always pull it up, add a little more. your yarn basket is finished.